my name is Mislove. I'm going to be talking today about increasing transparency of data aggregation of Facebook and its partners. I'd like to first off thank the DTL and its other constituent organizations for funding this work. And this work is actually centered around something a little bit different than a number of the other topics that we've heard today. So I want to start by asking, how many of you have heard of data brokers or data aggregators? So roughly half. So I'll give a little background for those of you who happen to have not. So data brokers are companies that basically make it their business model to collect, aggregate, curate, and then sell data on people. So these are companies like Axiom, Datalogix, TransUnion, Experian. These are all US-based companies. There may be other ones in Europe. And in general, the way they work is they collect data from a large variety of sources. Many of those sources are public records, like in the US, voter records, criminal records, vehicle registrations are all public. But they also partner with other private organizations. For example, companies that have loyalty cards, like when you go to the supermarket and get a discount, they aggregate this data and then resell it to other third parties. For example, banks will often use this information when deciding whether or not you should get a mortgage or a loan. Marketers will use this to segment the population into different groups of people for purposes of advertising. And political parties will use this information to target things for, get out the vote campaigns or getting more donations and so forth. So you may be wondering, what data do these companies have? And that's actually a very hard question to answer because they don't really want you to know. And so if you do a lot of Google searching, you'll run across a couple of different things. The first is this slide, which was actually made by Axiom, not by me. They're one of the major players here, where they were at a conference and they were talking about what data they have. And you can see examples on the slide of the sorts of data. I know it's hard to read. It includes things like individual information, things about your household, your wealth, what kind of property you own, your interests, purchase behavior. They claim over 700 different categories of purchase behavior, and so forth, right? But this is as much information as you can get. Second, if you keep digging on Google, eventually you'll come across this thing, which is called the Consumer Data Products Catalog. So this is what you get if you go to Axiom and want to buy data. And this is usually not publicly available. This is certainly not on Axiom's website. And if you look through it, it's a catalog full of pages that look like this, where each one of those are a data record type. They're information about people that you can buy. For example, what their wealth is, whether they are Democratic or Republican. And there's a number of different attributes here. There's like thousands of these things. I pulled out a few of them. They include things like race, ethnicity, gender, your political affiliation, your net worth. And then a number of very sensitive attributes, things like whether you have a propensity to gamble, whether or not you're divorced, certain medical information about whether you're interested in things about diabetics or smoking, weight loss. And then the final thing they do, and this is sort of persistent across a lot of advertising industries, is they divide people into these categories. So they give the categories ridiculous names, things like money seeker and senior needs and empty nester and so forth. And these are well-defined groups that advertisers can then go and say, I want a bunch of empty nesters. Axiom will come back and give that information, and then you can advertise to those people. Okay? So if you Google enough, you'll find this, and you can play around with it. It's quite interesting. So the question you're probably having, especially if you live in the US where this kind of crap happens all the time, is how much data do they have about me, right? And Axiom, to their credit, has a website called aboutthedata.com. You can go there. You have to give them your information, which feels a little dirty. But then they will reveal to you the attributes they have about you. And so I did this for both myself and my wife. And when you log in, you get a website, and it shows you 6 different categories: demographics, housing, vehicle, income, purchase data, and interests. And then you can click through and see what attributes they've inferred about you. So what subset of those thousands and thousands of things. So what I've shown on this slide is simply, do they have any attributes? That's the check or the X. And then second, how many attributes they have. And you'll notice that it's actually really interesting. For example, for me, they have no purchase data. The categories they have there are almost nothing, right? Compared to my wife, where they have tons of purchase data. And also, if you look at like our housing, we co-own our house. We're both on the mortgage. We're both on the title. But they know so they associate that with me, but not with her, right? So what this shows is, first off, it doesn't look like they have very many categories, at least on the two of us. And second, their data seems somewhat spotty. But the problem is we don't know how much data Axiom is actually revealing with this website. They didn't do this because they were forced to. They did this, they were sort of under some political pressure to make some of this data public. And finally, the worst thing of this all is that in the US at least, you have almost no right to know anything about this data. Outside of things like credit reports and loans and a few other niche areas, you don't have any right to request the companies give you the data, to access to check the correctness of it, to figure out where the data comes from, to ask them to delete it, or even worse, to know who's buying and selling your data. You literally do not have any rights to do that. So thus, it's very difficult for users to get any insight into this ecosystem, even though the data in the ecosystem is data about them. So that's the state of the world. And what's interesting is that Acxiom has been around since the late 60s. They've been doing this for years, right? But I'm going to argue something has now changed. And that is the introduction of what I'm calling 21st century data aggregators. These are companies that ostensibly run online social networks like Twitter and Facebook, but really they're just advertising services. And what they do is they collect data that's of a different form. So Facebook, Twitter, Google, and so forth all collect information on online activities of users, what users search, who they connect to, what their friends are, and so forth. And then those companies use that data to then make their advertising services more useful. That's their business model. So it's not entirely surprising that what we're seeing today is that these 21st century aggregators, i.e. the online social networks, are now partnering with the offline data brokers. So you can search for news reports, and Facebook works with Acxiom and Experian and Datalogix for a number of different things. So what that means is when you're an advertiser and you go to Facebook, you can now use the attributes collected by data brokers to target people on Facebook. That's the net result. But I'm going to argue not only this is scary, but it also presents us with an opportunity. The reason is, let's imagine you wanted to figure out what data brokers have on you. It turns out it's really difficult. You could go there and ask Acxiom, hey, I'd like to buy my data, but that is absolutely not their business model. They sell data in bulk, not individual people. You have to sign a contract with Acxiom to even get a copy of that report that I showed you on Google, and they're unlikely to allow researchers to do that. And finally, there's likely to be NDAs associated with getting access to data from Acxiom. But with online social networks, they're using the same data, but for a different purpose. They're using it to make advertising services more useful. The great thing is that anybody can be a Facebook advertiser. You can literally do it right now if you just go to ads.facebook.com and click a button. Congratulations, you're a Facebook advertiser. And so as a result, we might be able to use that fact to get insight into the data broker ecosystem. So our goal in this project is to use social network advertising as a window into data brokers and the kind of data they have on people. So what I want to do is briefly give you a little bit of information about Facebook's advertising service so you know sort of what we're doing, and then I'll talk a little bit about the tool and the study that we're going to build as part of this grant. So let me give you a little bit of background on Facebook. So how many of you actually placed an ad on Facebook? A couple of people? OK. So if you have, you will probably recognize this website. So if you go to ads.facebook.com and click on place an ad, you see this. There's basically 3 features here that are of importance to us. The first is all the crap here, which is the attribute-based targeting. So if you want to go to Facebook, this is how they originally made all their money, because you would go and say, I want to target 25-year-olds who live in Boston, who like this band, and whatever else you want, and Facebook would carve out those people for you. Second, once you choose those attributes, Facebook gives you what they call as a potential reach, or an audience size estimate. That's shown in the green over there. That's the number of people who match whatever parameters you select. The third is something they introduced more recently called custom audiences. Has anybody heard of custom audiences? Just a couple of people? OK, this is even scarier, because it used to be that what you could do is just choose the attributes. But now with custom audiences, you can go to Facebook and literally upload the PII of the people you want to target, and Facebook will match those against those people on Facebook. So to show you what that looks like, if you click on Create a Custom Audience, you get this website, which if you look sort of here, you'll see you can upload up to 15 different record types, things from email address, phone number, first name, last name, city, zip code, advertiser ID, and so forth. You upload those to Facebook. Facebook matches that to its users and then allows you to advertise to the people or the subset of the people you choose based on who it's able to match. So we use all of these as part of our tool. The second thing that we use is if you choose those interests, Facebook, to their credit, gives us information on the provenance of those attributes. So remember those demographics and attributes you could choose. When you click on each one, Facebook pops up a window that tells you where it got the data from. So as the first part of our study, what we did is we crawled all of the attributes on Facebook and figured out where they came from. So I want to give you a quick look at what that looks like. Now we did this from 8 different countries, I believe, because the set of attributes that you can target depend on the country where the advertiser's account is. So that's what I'm going to show you in this table. Columns are the different sources. The rows are where the advertiser's account is. And what you'll notice is that, at least as of April this year, Facebook itself provided 614 different targeting attributes. These are things inferred from Facebook, and I'll show you some examples in just a second. If you look at the data brokers, you see the numbers vary widely across the different countries and across the different data brokers. But you'll see that in the US, there's almost as many attributes from data brokers as there are from Facebook itself, largely due to Datalogics, which is a company that tracks a lot of purchase behavior. If you look at some of these attributes, for example, let's focus on the Facebook ones for just a minute, you'll see that they span a wide variety of different topics. They include things like behaviors, demographics, life events, and so forth. Many of these could be easily obtained from user activity. You could imagine how Facebook gets them. For example, life events is like, I got married, and so on Facebook you're probably going to post something like, I got married, so Facebook could infer that. Other ones are probably self-reported, things like educational history. Facebook is always pestering you to say where you went to college and so forth. And the third is all of the interests are likely inferred from your activity on Facebook, pages you like, ads you click on, and so forth. Now, if you look at the data broker categories, you see a very different set of things. Things like behaviors are purchase behaviors now, or how much money you have, which are things that Facebook has difficulty measuring from its own data. So you can see why they want to partner with these things. And the upshot is that today, because of all this partnering, Facebook likely has richer data on people than any individual data broker by itself because of their wide view. So what we want to do is build a transparency tool to reveal to users what attributes Facebook and the data broker has about them. So in collaboration with Krishna, we've been having a number of different projects where we look at the Facebook advertising interface. And one of the things we found is there's a way using the interface that you can infer the attributes of a person. If you want the technical details, come find me afterwards. But we want to use that to then bring users into our lab, show them their attributes without us seeing them, and then ask them questions about how complete these attributes are, like how many categories does Facebook or Axiom have, and then how accurate these attributes are for different people. So we have a prototype of this, and we ran this for both myself and my wife. I don't actively use Facebook, and there's some technical reasons why you have to be an active Facebook user for this to work, but it did work for my wife. And I've anonymized a number of the different categories. You may be able to read some of these, but these are the attributes, the Facebook provided attributes that they inferred for my wife. These range from things like when her birthday is, to what kind of phone she uses, what browser she uses, her political affiliation, and so forth. And then finally, we also inferred the data broker attributes for her, which include Axiom things about financial information, her net worth, her income, and these sorts of things. And then Datalogics has a lot of purchase behavior, including, sort of, she's vegetarian, they know that. We have a kid, they know that. And then finally, they apparently think she's a corporate executive, even though she's actually a high school teacher. So not quite sure what's up with that. So anyway, to conclude, we're currently working with the DTL grant to build this tool. We have a number of different challenges to ensure, for example, the privacy of the information, to make sure we never see it, but the users see it, and then to make sure that our tool scales without putting too much load on Facebook. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions. If you want to know anything more about all this data broker and advertising, we have a couple of different papers that are coming up. There's an Oakland paper, an NDSS paper, and a Fat Star paper. The links are here. So they talk more about the various attributes here. But thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam.
I would steer you towards our NDSS paper, which looks exactly at that. So what he's referring to is that Facebook has a page you can go to that claims to reveal your attributes to you. We found this is wildly incomplete. In particular, there are no data broker attributes provided on that page. Only some of the Facebook provided attributes are there. In fact, we're able to find more that we can infer via the site that advertisers can target with you that Facebook does not reveal to you. So it's basically what they provide is incomplete.
So you can audit the self-regulation programs that they have, right?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jose from Universidad Carlos III, Madrid. We are doing a similar research, and I'm wondering, because you show us some interest, your wife is vegetarian and so on, we found that there are some interests that they put in our profiles that in fact they are not real. So I'm wondering, how do you deal with these things? I mean, maybe your wife is not vegetarian, but Dietologic or Facebook is thinking that your wife is vegetarian.
So we don't define the attributes. They are actually provided by Facebook. So if you look here, you'll see that falls under, I know it's hard to read, behaviors, purchase behavior, food and drink, vegetarian. So this is a category that you as an advertiser can choose to target when you go to advertise to people. Now, like I was asking his question, or answering his question, that may or may not be revealed by Facebook on their own page. And sometimes we found it was revealed differently, like they aggregate the categories in various ways, but they don't give you exactly the categories that they let the advertisers target, if that makes sense. Oh, okay, so you're asking is how do you differentiate between real information and inferred information? We don't really know exactly how Facebook got the data. For some of them, they'll give a little bit of an explanation saying this is based on your profile. And for others, they'll have generic text that says this is based on your activity on Facebook, right? But they don't really tell you exactly where that comes from. And that's even worse for the data broker attributes because those are inferred by third parties. So Facebook probably doesn't know itself how those attributes were inferred.
How do you have any ways to infer between lookalike, how they do targeting for lookalike versus your data?
So like you mean lookalike audiences?
Yep.
Yeah, so those, we haven't looked for data broker attributes, we haven't looked exactly at those. But we have looked at those in terms of discrimination. So what Ashkan is referring to is you can go to Facebook, you can upload a custom audience, and then you can say, go find me more people like this, right? And you can imagine an advertiser would like this because they have like their set of customers and like you're like, go find me potential customers, right? But what we found is this is actually a really powerful discrimination tool because I can go and upload a few people of a particular race or a few people who absolutely are not part of a particular race and then tell Facebook, go find it. And what we found is that they expand the audience in exactly, like to respect the bias and discrimination that exists in the audience you use. Right. So we have some results. That's, I believe, our Fat Star paper that will be out in a week or two that looks exactly at lookalike audiences and how it sort of amplifies discrimination that may exist because of custom audiences. Yeah, we weren't able to, because we would go upload, say, voter records and then see, because for a lot, like in certain states, voter records have race, so we could see what was the race of the people we uploaded and what was the race that Facebook gave us back. And for those, but we don't have the friend information for those people, so it's hard to know exactly what they were doing. But you could do it based on attributes because for any of the, either the expanded audience or the source audience, you can get the potential reach. So you can say how many of them have any of those 1,200 attributes. So you might be able to make some arguments there.
Yeah, Ben Lush's Brave. So for the inferred user model, effectively, be that through the means of third-party tracking or client-side, the way we are doing at Brave, we're sort of struggling with the notion of like, what is the propensity of the user to want to change these things, right? You mentioned, you know, it's been known for many years that these things are full of holes. At least what's presented to you is full of holes, and there's always a question, well, are they holding back? Are they just basically doing this for fun? And all those issues you highlighted. But then, of course, we've sort of anecdotally encountered users who are like, no, this is clearly wrong. I'm going to go and change that. But we don't know how much people care about themselves being misrepresented or mischaracterized. We sort of know this, you know, on a basis of our own experiences, but that's no science, right? So have you tried to study whether people are pushing for the ability to sort of actively correct it? And of course, the ugly side of that is that they'll, you know, come up with things that are clearly wrong as well.
So that's interesting. I will say both Facebook and Axiom allow users to remove attributes, and I think you can even choose different attributes if they, you know, but it's not clear how exactly they use whatever you do. So we haven't looked at to what extent users use those tools. My feeling is that most of the information, like the things that people want is more about like literally what data do you have on me and how do I stop you from using that? It's less, I don't see users clamoring for better ads, if that makes sense. But it remains an open question.
Means, I mean, there is a certain element of sort of nasty surprise when they are like, this is clearly not me. Oh, this is not what it should be. So Serge, I think, has a point there.
We actually did a study on this. So Google, for a while, I don't think it's the case anymore, but Google used to have this interface where if you're logged into your Google account, you can go to this page and it'll show all the inferred demographics and interests about you. So we showed that to people, and then we asked them, what's more concerning, that the information is accurate or inaccurate? And we found that it was evenly split. Yeah.
So his question is, he says he sees a lot of fear, and he's wondering as citizens, what can we do today to address the situation? So I'm speaking mostly from the US. I'm not as familiar with the way it works in Europe. In the US, there are particular areas like credit or housing or so forth where I think there's a panel discussed this morning, they legally have to give you an answer as to why they did something and what attributes about you led to a particular decision being made. I think right now, you literally have no legal rights to most of this information. And so as a result, like you are sort of powerless. So I think a lot of the way forward here would be to develop tools to make this available to users, but also to work on the legal fronts to say that the users have some sort of rights to at least inspect the data and then like correct it. For example, with credit reports in the US, you legally have to be given that once a year, and you have there's a process by which you can make a complaint if there's an error in your credit report. And I think similar things could be done here.
Yeah, in Europe you can go to your data protection authority and file an official complaint, but then you need to take a sabbatical from your work and follow up. Yeah. All right, thanks a lot, Alain.
No worries.